Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Man, it's great to be back on the Tech Sideline podcast set. We're talking all about the college football transfer portal and the Hokies roster, how things are shaping up heading into the spring semester. It's episode 402 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. At you on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, from our high-tech studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. Subscriptions are just $12 a month for loads of content, and as always, for Virginia Tech students, your subscription is free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Today's TSL podcast is also brought to you by Robertson and Cox Real Estate Team. Hokie parents and students, don't pay rent. Instead, invest. The RNC team can help you find the right place to buy for your students' housing during your time here in Blacksburg. Visit rncteam.com to learn more, and we'll drop a link in the YouTube description below. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To my right, Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, we got our senior staff writer, Mr. Andy Bitter. And then behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, Nick Brown, the mustache man. Nobody in the fourth chair today, guys. Good to be back. It's been over a month, so super glad to see you guys. And I think we got to start today with a bit of a disclaimer on the defensive coordinator situation here. We don't know anything. As soon as we do, you'll be the first to hear about it. Andy, we'll go to you.
The defensive coordinator is going to be in the fourth chair, but they still haven't hired anybody. It's been 42 days. This is day 42 since they fired Chris Marv, and there's still no hire yet. Everybody keeps asking me. People in my neighborhood keep asking me who's going to be the defensive coordinator. I don't know yet. I don't know that a lot of people know that. I don't know that Brent Pry knows yet. This has been an extremely deliberate process, perhaps too deliberate. I don't know they can go on for 6 weeks like this and necessarily you nabbed your first target or your first guy on your list. So I don't know who it is yet. It seems like they've interviewed quite a few people and they're going through a lot. And maybe while we're doing this podcast, it might happen. I don't know. I've got my computer up in case any news breaks during this thing. But I can feel the frustration out there from Virginia Tech fans because this has taken so long. But you also have to remember this is probably the most important hire that Brent Pry is going to make, I would imagine. Yeah. I mean, his job is on the line essentially coming up. Sure. And if it's not this season, the next season, you have to get this defensive coordinator hire right. And you can't say that he's not taking his time and doing his due diligence on this, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I don't know when to expect it. I don't know who it's going to be. We've heard absolutely nothing.
Quit getting angry at us. We're not making the hire, all right? This isn't us. I would have knocked this out right away.
Yeah, no
First
doubt.
Week.
Exactly. Done deal. I don't know when they're going to announce it. It'll probably be something stupid like 4:45 p.m. tomorrow on Friday. Everybody's ready to go to happy hour, and then bam, news release.
That'd be great. News dump hour, and they're doing it then. It's like that's when you want to trumpet your new defensive coordinator hire. You don't want to hire it or hide it. So I don't know. I don't know what the holdup is.
There we go. Maybe the new defensive coordinator though will appear at PK's. Chris Marv was a frequent there.
He was.
So maybe
I think most of the coaches have like office space over at PK.
I think so too.
Yeah, Brent Pry enjoys his time in there as well. Well, there is one vacancy that was definitely filled. Jarrett Ferguson will be the new head of strength and conditioning. Interesting story here because he's promoted from assistant strength and conditioning director. Been a part of the program, 2 different stints spanning 16 total years. Obviously a player as well. His second stint began in 2022 when Brent Pry was hired here at Virginia Tech, and has a long-standing relationship with the great Mike Gentry. So, this is a Hokie through and through.
Ferguson was a walk-on at Virginia Tech, one of the best strength and conditioning athletes in the history of the program. A Mike Gentry disciple, came up under Gentry, of course. I'm not surprised at all that they landed on Ferguson. If you'd forced me to make a bet when Brent Pry announced that he was going to make staff decisions, if he had to guess right now who's going to be the next strength and conditioning coach, I would have guessed Ferguson.
Do you have a lot of strength and conditioning coaches on your hot board?
I don't. But
I'll be honest, I don't know how many I could name. I think obvious of the 3 positions that were open, and this was the one where you go, I could really see an internal hire here. And I think the Gentry piece of this is pretty important. Gentry obviously was here when Brent Pry was a GA, and he was so instrumental to all those years when Frank Beamer was here. And you talk to any former player about Mike Gentry, and they go, that guy was tough as nails, and he made this team tough as nails. And I think Brent Pry knows that. He witnessed it. Obviously, Bud Foster was around that forever. He's advising on the defense now. I'm sure Bud was putting in a word for, hey, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have this connection to this guy that you made this team really tough back in the day. So you talk about the end of games and being conditioned. I think there's an attitude about it too that Jarrett probably picked up from his times with Mike Gentry. I think that's a pretty important connection there, and obviously a big plus in his corner. I think you can look at this and you go, well, you got such a problem with conditioning and preparedness for the season, and he was on the coaching staff last year. There's a difference between being an assistant and being in charge, so perhaps that's how they look at it. But I think, on paper, you look at his history, his connection to Virginia Tech, his connection to the strength program, and in total, Mike Gentry, everything associated with it, it makes a lot of sense making this hire.
And he also had basically a 1-month audition.
That's right. Yeah.
As the interim. As the coach preparing the team for the bowl game. And I don't think we saw any conditioning issues in the bowl game or anything like that. Not that having that 1 month, when your practices are broken up to a certain extent because, going home for Christmas or whatever. Not that you can make a huge impact in that 1 month, but he definitely had, a little extra on his resume.
When in doubt, never the worst thing to just hire a former alum.
Especially in Virginia Tech. People love that here.
People, it's like, I've never heard of this guy. He's from outside the program. It's like, well, he could be good. But if you hire an alum, everybody's just like, great hire. Yeah. I know that guy. I've seen that guy before. But I do think this is a good hire for this position.
I think when it comes to strength and conditioning coaches, the one thing I'll always trust is if you look the part, then I trust in that, and he's Jack, so I trust it.
Do you have a shaved head? Do you have a beard? And do you have a neck? And if the answer to the last one is yes, then you can't be an effective strength coach. You have to have no neck, shaved head, and a beard. And I think Jared Ferguson qualifies in all 3 categories. He still looks pretty strong. Looking at him.
Does. No doubt. All right, let's get into our transfer portal conversation here. We're literally going to go position by position throughout the guys that are now on the roster heading into this spring semester. But first and foremost, off the top here, I want to just kind of note that you got guys from all over the place. You have some guys from acclaimed Power 4 programs like Selden coming from Tennessee. You got Bass coming from Pittsburgh right in the ACC, and then you got a lot of guys from some smaller group of 5 schools and even FCS level competitors.
I think it's a fairly typical mix of what you would expect. Now, the Hokies signed more players from the portal than they have in the past. I think they ended up with 19 in this period. There will probably be a few more after spring as there's more attrition and things like that. Ultimately, that they did sort of what I expected them to do, just bring in a lot of new players. And this is going to be like the direct opposite of last year. Like last year, all the coaches were back and almost every single player was back. Not that much transfer portal movement. Obviously, Aeneas Peoples came in and a couple other guys, but I think was only 6 or 7 guys that they took last year. Well, this year it's going to be a whole lot of new coaches, a whole lot of new players, and they're specific coaches with a lot of turnover in their rooms. Like Elijah Brooks has got 3 new running backs from the portal, plus a true freshman. You've got
17 new safeties in the program.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like every other commit they were getting was a
Virginia
safety.
Tech is going to create a new defensive scheme next year. It's going to be called the 0-0-11 defense.
I think that's Pry. Every time we talk to Pry, it's like, is there anything else you need from the portal? It's like, I wouldn't mind a versatile defensive back.
Right. Yeah.
Every single time we ask him about that, it's like, well, I think actually offensive line help would be your top priority.
Yeah.
He always says some sort of versatile defensive back.
Right.
I feel like that's just like his defensive coordinator past there is speaking. Like, you cannot be shorthanded in the defensive secondary. And they kind of were in recent years with all the injuries that they've had at safety. It feels like they've always been up against it at that spot. So come hell or high water, they are not going to be short on bodies this year in the defensive secondary.
I'm still laughing at the 0-0-11.
Yeah,
scheme.
we talked the last 2 years basically that, Tech took Derek Canteen. He was a corner / safety. He played here for a year in that star role and did a pretty good job. He transferred out to Cincinnati because he wanted to play corner. Of course, he gets to Cincinnati and becomes their starting safety and had a great year for Cincinnati.
Yeah, he was
this past year.
hooping.
Virginia Tech certainly could have used him. I wish they had, used him at safety while he was here. I think that would have helped. But
He would have started at safety this year.
Absolutely. Maybe
easily.
Maybe right. And he would have last year too, in my opinion. But I think they've wanted to sign like a true safety the last couple of years and didn't sign any. Well, they've more than made up for that this year. They've got 4 guys, and one of them, probably at least one of them, will end up getting a look at the star linebacker position as well.
I think the interesting thing is it's just so many transfers that, everybody's like, oh, they're number 2 in the ACC in transfer rankings or something like that. It's like, well, who was number 2 last year? Florida State.
Right.
So sometimes it doesn't all gel and it doesn't all come together. And I think that's, sometimes the risk you run when there are so many transfers that you're bringing into a program is how do those guys come in and sort of, work their way into the program, coexist with the previous players that were already here and maybe expecting to move up the depth chart. And they don't necessarily because these other transfers come in and take those spots. That's going to be the key part of this offseason is bringing all those guys in, onboarding them, getting them in with the program. They've done a great job with that in previous spots, but it's also been like plugging a guy in here. It's like, okay, Aeneas Peebles coming in the defensive line or Brumfield coming in the linebacker crew. When it's like one guy or 2 guys coming in, typically, I think it's easier to bring them into the program and get them up to speed with things, and it doesn't really upset the norm. I think this many guys like this, including how many guys they just signed that are going to be brand new to the program. You're talking about
20% of the roster,
like
basically.
45 guys that are brand new to the program. Essentially. So that's going to be a real challenge for this staff. And, the success of next year, I think is going to be based on how they accomplish things in the spring and the summer and getting everybody, ready and in line with how they play football here.
I think the biggest position everybody had circled on their book heading into this offseason was how do you fill the shoes of a guy like Bashal Tootin and the production that he offers in the running back room? So they go out, they get 3 tailbacks in the portal, Marcellus Hawkins from Central Missouri, Terrian Stewart from Bowling Green, and Braden Bennett from Coastal Carolina. So I ask you guys that exact question. How do you fill the production of a guy like Bashal Tootin?
Go Moneyball on it. You rebuild him in the aggregate.
That's right.
I don't think there's one way to, one of these guys might surprise us. I mean, we talk about Tootin like he was this sure thing. He came from North Carolina A&T. Like, obviously, people passed him up the first time and didn't see what, the kind of skills he had, and then he showed it on the field. These other guys that they brought in, I think Terrian Stewart, real good physical runner. I don't know if he's going to be the home run threat that Bashal Tootin was. I think Braden Bennett might be more of like a pass catching type guy. And, I don't know too much about Hawkins from his history, but I think those guys together combined in that room and then some of the younger guys that they have, I think you can see a more dispersal of carries this year rather than one guy who's just going to carry the load for 95% of the time.
Totally agree with that. It was pretty much all Tootin this past year. When it wasn't Tootin, it was drones, right? Technically, Malachi Thomas was the backup tailback, but he just didn't get very many carries at all.
And it looked like it was going to be Prelo for a little bit, and then he got hurt.
Then he got hurt.
And honestly, I think they take all these guys because, if what we're hearing with Prelo's injury, I think you get to the middle of next year, and I don't think he's going to be ready.
I agree.
So it might be a deal where he takes a red shirt, and we're thinking about 2026 before he's really back in himself.
I think Terrian Stewart has some of the best broken tackles stats in the country. If you go by PFF, he's a dominant tackle breaker. He has such a low center of gravity.
5'9", 220. Is that like that's like Steven Peoples-esque a little bit?
It's Khalil Herbert, basically. He's Khalil Herbert sized. Does not have the explosiveness. He's an excellent, traditional running back. He was taken off the field generally at Bowling Green on 3rd downs. Just not a great pass catcher, not necessarily fluid enough to be a great pass protector. So Third down is going to be by committee. Braden Bennett has had a very good career at Coastal Carolina. He's been good in pass protection. He's caught, I want to say, 70 to 90 passes in his career.
It's a lot of receptions.
Yeah, so he's a good receiver.
He's tall, too. He's like 6'2" or something like that.
6'2", and I want to say, 210, 215, something like that. So he's got some versatility in his game. Don't know as much about Marcellus Hawkins coming from a Division II program. He's had some injuries, but he's another option. What's going to happen with Tyler Mason and Jeremiah Coney? Coney had a good game against Syracuse, but then just like that, the next week, they don't have a running back, and they put him on the field for 30 snaps, but never give him the football. So how much do they really trust him? And it kind of seemed like Tyler Mason was more, they got the same number of carries in the bowl game, but Mason was more effective. One of those guys is going to be the fifth string back. Once you get down to your fifth running back, you don't get very many reps. So I would not be surprised to see attrition at the running back spot after the spring.
Do you give Overton a shot to get on the field?
I mean,
because Pry did. He signed. I mean, they always say that when they sign.
Of course.
But he specifically went out of his way to say that he thinks Overton could be a contributor this fall.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy. He enrolled for the spring, I believe.
He is. Yeah, he was practicing at the bowl game.
So all these guys
he actually got hurt at one of the practices we were at.
Oh, jeez. So of course,
bad for the strength and conditioning.
I think he was just like on crutches or something like that at the game, but I don't think it was serious.
So so sprained his ankle or something like that. Okay. So you've got 7 scholarship running backs, but one of them, Prelo, won't be available in the spring.
Probably, not in the spring.
Certainly
possibly
not
in the fall.
Right. So all these guys are going to get a shot in the spring. So yes, I would think he'll have an opportunity.
How about these wide receivers? You bring in Cameron Seldon from Tennessee, Donovan Green from Wake Forest. And I ask you guys first, why was Seldon a wide receiver and not a running back? Because I know he has the ability for a little bit of both. Why did the Hokies want him to play as a wideout?
I think that's just where he wanted to play. I don't know too much of the history. I just know that when he signed, they were like, he's coming as a receiver. It's not going to be as a running back. So I don't know if, you look at his size, if they could use him in a Deebo Samuel type way, where it's, you're a receiver, but they'll hand the ball to you on sweeps and things like that. It seems like he might be sort of an offensive weapon type of thing, where you just try to get the ball in his hands because he's got those skills. He hasn't really had a chance to show it too much. Maybe some injuries in his history. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you just go to a place like Tennessee and sometimes you get lost in the mix. I don't think running back was his best position, and they played him at running back.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how they use him necessarily. But I think Green, history of production down there, didn't have the best quarterback throwing him the ball last year, certainly. And, even 2 years ago, I think they really struggled to throw the ball down there at Wake Forest. But the history of production throughout his 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been there, I think he could be in line for a starting job there. Him and Aiden Green, the Green combination. Gang Green, whatever we're calling it.
And they both end it with an E.
That's right.
Gang Green. Wow.
Yeah, that's Gang Green.
Nice. How long
different from Gang Ginger? I think somebody
one?
Suggested to me on Twitter, so I can't take credit for that. The Ginger Gang, I did come up with that one though for the defensive ends, but I think they needed a veteran piece in that wide receiver room because you have a lot of young guys. Certainly the guys that they just signed this year. You've got Keelan Adams, Chance Wiggins from last year. Green is a little bit more advanced than those other guys in terms of playing time, but the older guys in the room like Tucker Holloway has not really played a whole lot and didn't play at all last year. So I think you needed that upperclassman to come into that room and be the veteran guy and just sort of set the standard sometimes. I think Donovan Green could be that guy.
Yeah, if you look, 11 scholarship receivers, 6 of them are freshmen. 2 of them redshirt freshmen, 4 of them true freshmen. One of those, Micah Matthews, is going to be a baseball player at first. So really you're talking, 10 receivers this spring. The 2 Greens, I think, have combined for like 85 to 90% of this group's snaps at the college level. So after those 2 guys, it's a tremendous amount of inexperience. And Donovan Green himself, he's missed 2 seasons with injuries at Wake Forest. He is not, and even this past season he came back. I think he had an 11 catch performance against UVA or something like that, which was basically almost half of his catches for the year, but then missed a bunch of time after that with an injury. Never caught more than 1 pass in a game the rest of the season. So this is a guy who the last few years hasn't been healthy very much. So you have to keep that in mind. I think he's the most experienced wide receiver and a starter when healthy. Is he going to be healthy? That's the big question mark around him. I look at Aiden Green, and if I had to make a prediction, Aiden Green is the leading receiver on the team next season.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick at all. Last thing on the wide receivers here. Do you find it to be maybe difficult to recruit receivers when you know Virginia Tech is a run-first type of offensive scheme team?
Fontel Mines hasn't found it difficult.
Yeah, they seem to continue to convince these guys to come here.
At some point, it might play a role. I do think I sense a little bit of money balling about how the Hokies are setting up their roster, a little more strategic this year. We don't know exactly what guys get paid or anything like that.
Don't we have to know starting this year?
Maybe.
Isn't that a thing?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know if that's still going to be publicly available. I'm sure they'll find ways around rejecting any kind of open records request.
Right. I think the Hokies dedicated more resources, we'll say, to their wide receiver roster this past year. And even when it was like, okay, even with drones not being the most advanced passer in the world, and you're probably set up starting with the quarterback to be more of a run-focused team, but you still set your roster up to have so many good wide receivers and only one good running back. This year they've taken the other approach. They brought in Selden, who probably wasn't all that expensive because he hasn't been all that productive. Green, who's a veteran, but injury plagued, so probably not very expensive.
And you're getting him with a coaching change from Wake. So
exactly.
There's a reason why he's leaving.
Meanwhile, you bring in 3 new transfer portal running backs and 3 new portal offensive linemen, which we'll get to later. So I think we're seeing a reapplication of certain resources going to the running back room, going to the offensive line room. And I think that fits more along the lines of the strengths of Virginia Tech's quarterback and how this offense should be. Now, whether that will hurt wide receiver recruiting in the long term, I don't know. But Virginia Tech historically, its best teams, they've been run-focused. Yes, they've had plenty of good wide receivers, but they've always been a run-focused, run-emphasis team.
Sure, no doubt. All right, let's go to that offensive line, Chris, that you had just mentioned. No surprises here. Thomas Rymek, Kyle Altuner, Lucas Austin all follow Matt Moore, the new offensive line coach from West Virginia.
Are we positive that's how you pronounce Rymek?
Oh, Tomas Rymek.
Tomas.
Yeah. Came into that with some hesitation, so thank you, Nick.
Excellent player. Was the number 1 graded offensive guard in the Big 12 this past year. Outstanding in pass protection. He's a tall guy, so sometimes shorter defensive tackles can kind of get under him in the run game to a certain extent, but this is the best possible scenario for Virginia Tech. It's a possibility that maybe he could be tried at right tackle. Like Virginia Tech does not have any, they've only got 1 experienced offensive tackle, right? They've already got 2 experienced guards even before you include Rymek. So it's possible maybe he could get a look at right tackle, but it's a move I would only make. That'd be a last resort move for me because he's played his whole career at West Virginia at left guard, has been outstanding. You don't want to mess that up, I don't think. I like the idea of getting your 2 best, not necessarily your 2 best offensive linemen per se, but he's their best offensive guard and will be their best overall offensive lineman. And then Johnny Jarrett is their most experienced offensive tackle, and he would be starting at left tackle. If you could get your best 2 guys next to each other, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think they just need bodies in that room. That's what they've gotten. Matt Moore bringing a bunch of guys from West Virginia with him, 2 other guys as well. I think it's a situation where there's so much turnover in that room that you can't necessarily look at the positions and just say these guys are locked into these positions. You have to find your best 5, find out where they work best together. And if that means moving some guys from guard to tackle or guard to center, center to guard, whatever direction you're moving, I think that's what this spring is going to be. It's a time for experimentation to find out who can play where, who can help you where are the deficiencies. And, if, Remock here, is better at guard, but the line is better if he's playing tackle, then you have to play him at tackle. I think that's just how it has to go because it has to be for the betterment of the line as a whole. And, there are a lot of holes in that line right now. You got to plug them because they lost a lot of guys from last year's team, and last year's team, wasn't great when you look at the blocking numbers at the end of the year.
Vance Weiss would be like a kid in a candy shop this spring at Virginia Tech. He always liked to move guys around everywhere.
He'd have days where he'd just be like, everybody move one spot to the left.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
like,
God. That would be, he'd be doing that like crazy this spring. But Altooners,
where are we on Vance Weiss? I know people used to not like him, and then they really liked him, and then they're like, we sort of don't like him, and now they're like, come back. And
please save us, Vance Weiss.
Here's the spoiler. He was always a pretty good coach.
Yes.
You look at his history of guys that he had here and the history of other places. He's a pretty good coach.
I think the Tech offensive line this year will struggle to a certain extent. That doesn't mean Matt Moore is not a good coach. I'm just looking down this roster, and there's a redshirt. You got 3 redshirt seniors, 2 redshirt juniors, 2 redshirt sophomores, 5 redshirt freshmen, 2 true freshmen. So you got an offensive line. Half of it is freshmen right now, and two with 2 more redshirt sophomores, and even some of the upperclassmen like Montavious Cunningham is the old head in the room, and he played like 24 snaps this year. Right. I'll tell you this: Altoona, they thought was the long-term center at West Virginia. He'll probably come in, and it wouldn't shock me if he started at center this year, or Tommy Ricard. Moore recruited Tommy Ricard to West Virginia as well, so he's very familiar with him. What helps is guys like Carter Stallard, Tommy Ricard, Brody Meadows, Lath Ganem. They were all recruited by West Virginia by Matt Moore, so he's already very familiar with some of Tech's personnel. Still, it's going to be a young group. Lucas Austin from West Virginia, redshirt freshman. He's going to factor in at right tackle probably. I encourage everyone to log into Brandon Patterson's article from yesterday where he scouts the offensive line signees. He included a 7-minute highlight video of Lucas Austin playing high school basketball, where he is his school's all-time leading scorer, rebounder, and three-point shooter. It's 6'7", 275 pounds. Watch this guy's highlight tape, basketball highlight tape. He's like a 275-pound Larry Bird. Like, he's out there making like 22-foot three-pointers. I mean, this guy's going to go to McComas and just wow people. But he was a driver also. He would drive by guys. He's got great feet.
Interesting.
Great feet. Offensive tackles have great feet.
Maybe Mike Young could use him.
Yeah. I mean, he might probably use him on the boards for sure, and could use another shooter. But right now, I think Austin's would seriously be in the mix for a starting position this year, despite his age.
And that was my question. Do you think all 3 of these guys are going to have a good shot to start? I mean, that's 3 or 5.
Remac's definitely going to start.
Yeah.
No question. I mean, he was arguably the best offensive guard in the Big 12 last year. He walks right in without even one practice and is the starter.
Sure.
But
as a collective, all 3 of them, do you think 3 of them could be 3 of the 5?
It's certainly possible. Yeah. I mean,
the only guy coming back who started last year was Schick, who was a starter at the end of the year, and he was always sort of on the border. He was always the one they're like, well, we'll split time with somebody else, and always finding reasons to get somebody else in the game when he was there. So I think all 5 spots are there for the taking.
Yeah, I mean,
whoever's going to show out in the spring, I think is there for the taking.
For sure. And I would like to note that I'll be interested to see what happens with Lath Ganem. He started his career at left tackle at Tech.
They moved him all around.
They moved him.
They got to find a spot for him.
They tried to force him into left guard spot this past season, and it didn't work. He didn't play well in his 3 starts there. I would not be surprised, since they've got 3 experienced guards in the program right now. I wouldn't be shocked if Ganem got a look at right tackle this spring, and I think tackle might be his best position. I think he might be better suited to blocking defensive ends than defensive tackles, so that's something to monitor.
Moving on to the defensive backs. Now, this is a spot where a lot of people are going to see on a lot of these sites, it's going to be listed as DB. So what I want us to do is kind of walk everybody through where these guys are actually going to be placed.
They're all
in the
cheetahs.
secondary.
What are you talking about?
They're all cheetahs.
There we go. We got Sherrod Koval from Clemson. He's probably the biggest guy in this class as far as the acclaims to his name playing over at Clemson. Isaiah Brown Murray, a transfer from East Carolina. Tyson Flowers from Rice. Joseph Reddish, of course, we know his brother. He's coming from Wingate. Isaiah Cash from Sam Houston, and then Christian Ellis from New Mexico. Starting with Koval from Clemson, where's he going to be? Safety, right?
Yeah. Or star. Now, he's a guy everybody remembers him, 4-star out of the state of Virginia. I think he was top 5 in the state. Played about 400 snaps during his career at Clemson. Did have an injury. I think I think in 2023 he got hurt. Came back in 2024. was playing a little bit, but just didn't have it seemed. So he never really lived up to the hype at Clemson, and then he got hurt. So how good is he? I don't know. We'll find out. The other guys were lower rated coming out of high school, but have been more productive at the college level. But that's the thing. The same thing with Koval as these other guys. They're going to be boundary safety. They're going to be a wide side safety. They're going to be a star. It's a lot to figure out. We don't even know who the safeties coach is going to be at this point, because the next defensive coordinator could be the safeties coach.
True.
Right? Like right now it's Pearson Prelo, but if the next defensive coordinator is a safeties coach, then Prelo is going to be assistant safeties coach or something like that. So there's a lot of things that have to work themselves out.
How about Isaiah Brown Murray from East Carolina?
Oh, cornerback all the way, and you would pencil him in a starting role right now. Did you start the last 2 years, I think?
I think so.
I know we did this past year, but I think it was 2 years.
Would you go maybe him and Lovett as the top two guys right now?
I think those would definitely be your top two right now.
Yeah, and I think then you're looking for depth. Obviously, Thomas Williams played last year, started the bowl game. I think he did all right in the bowl game. Joseph Reddish, I think, is a cornerback too. It'd be interesting to see how he fits in the mix. And they have some younger guys there too, with Joshua Clark within the program, who played a little bit in the bowl game as well. He got called for a penalty on that one. I don't know, maybe a ticky-tack call on that one. I thought he actually had decent coverage on that play. But, they had to restock that room at cornerback. And I think you look at this guy from ECU. He's got the experience. He's played more. He started more games there than the entire roster combined at cornerback. Because Lovett is the leading returning starter with 2 starts. So, they need some experience in that room, and I think he's a guy that provides it.
Yeah, and I'll still feel, even though Tech lost 2 good players in Delane and Strong, by adding Brown Murray, I was a big fan of Lovett coming out of DeMatha when he was recruited. And outside of the Duke game this past year, he's played well whenever he's been called upon. Thomas Williams got his feet wet and did okay this year. They're high on Josh Clark. I think I'll still feel pretty good about Tech's 2 deep this year, or at least maybe their top 3 at corner. I don't think cornerback's going to be an issue despite the losses. That's a position where it's a lot easier to reload at cornerback than it is a position like offensive line.
Sure. How about a guy like Tyson Flowers? You mentioned Reddish, so we'll go Flowers, we'll go Cash, and we'll go Ellis. Where do you see them in the mix?
Safeties all the way.
All of them.
You just don't know which one's going to play star. You don't know which one's going to play free safety. You don't know which one's going to play boundary safety. Again, that's stuff that's got to get sorted out in the spring. The good thing, like Flowers has 2 years left. Now he's the one to keep an eye on. I think. I want my personal take, and I could be wrong, because you're evaluating players in different systems, and you don't know exactly what position that they're going to play at Virginia Tech. But amongst the safety guys, my gut feel is that the 2 best football players are Isaiah Cash and Tyson Flowers.
Interesting.
My gut feel.
Yeah, and I think you always have to remember that from that safety pool, they're probably pulling the star guy as well. I mean, all the star linebackers they've had so far, the trend is to get smaller and faster as you get closer to the line. So it's like they recruited Caleb Woodson specifically to play the star spot, and then it's like, well, no, he's actually going to play linebacker, one of the inside spots. Kelly Lawson was like that too. It was like, try him at star, inside linebacker. The McDonald twins, inside linebacker, the one became a defensive end too. So I'm thinking, incredibly, they started their careers at safeties here. So I think if you're looking for that star spot, probably Caleb Spencer, top guy right now, or at least the top guy going in the spring. And then I would imagine you would pull some of that depth from these new safeties that they have, just because historically that's how they've done it.
All right, let's go to the linebacker spot. You brought in just one, Jordan Bass from Pittsburgh.
He had an interesting start to his Virginia Tech career over the weekend.
I didn't know if we were going to bring that up or not, but what do we like out of Jordan Bass?
Well, I like his size. He's a former top 5 recruit of the state of Virginia, and this fits right in with all these other linebackers Virginia Tech has recruited. He never played linebacker until he got to college. He was a high school safety. Went to Pitt. Played their star position, which is pretty similar to Virginia Tech's star position. That their star is inside the tackle box a little bit more than Virginia Tech's, which is never inside the tackle box. But he's still mainly been an outside linebacker. Played pretty well there. The problem is he was behind an all ACC player who's the same age, so he's got to go somewhere to get some playing time. He's a guy right now, I think they'll probably play at will. But if they do want to get bigger at star, that's probably his natural position. That's a position he's most used to playing. So he's an option. I just hope they put him in a position and leave him there, unlike what they've done with the rest of their linebackers.
Yeah, and we should mention he got a DWI with marijuana somewhat recently. I think it was
over the weekend,
January 18th, something like that. So I don't think that's a kick him off the team type offense.
It's a misdemeanor.
It's 2 misdemeanors that he has. You only get an automatic suspension at Virginia Tech if it's a felony charge. So he hasn't risen to that level. I would imagine that there's some extra conditioning that might be in his future.
He's going to get to know Jarrett Ferguson really well.
I think that might be the case, but I do imagine you will see him out there this spring, and it's not going to affect things all that much.
Awesome. Lastly, for our position by position breakdown here, we got the defensive line / defensive ends. You got Jazari Priester from Hampton, Arias Nash from Mercer, James. I'm gonna ask for Chris's or Andy's help on that one.
Dejoncum. I think Dijon Mustard.
Okay. Dejoncum from Eastern Michigan. Excited to see what he brings to the table in particular. And then Ben Bell from Texas State. Similar to the Tootin question here, how do you fill the gap of a guy like APR? To me, it seems like it's going to have to be more of a sacks by committee approach.
Well, you're not going to have one guy getting 16 sacks next year.
Right.
I feel safe saying that. Dejoncum is interesting because he started at middle linebacker for Eastern Michigan, and now they're going to move him to defensive end. And he had 98 tackles, 12 tackles for loss. I think he's the most natural inside linebacker on the roster, and they're going to move him to defensive end. Now, there is precedence. There was a player at Penn State whose name I forget off the top of my head, had been a linebacker for them, and they moved him to defensive end, and he had a pretty good senior year there. And now he still plays in the NFL as a defensive end, I believe, or outside linebacker type. Forget the scheme. Semantics. He's an edge in the NFL. Dejoncum, they could have a similar plan in place for him. But I like him. He's big. Like he doesn't miss weight room days. He's a guy that looks like he would get along very well with Jarrett Ferguson. Some people, you can just look at him and you can tell that they take the weight room seriously, and he does.
What are the odds that they got 2 redheaded defensive end edge rushers?
It's almost like it's planned. Yeah.
Dejoncum's got the dreadlocks. What's his Twitter handle? The Ginger Freak.
The Ginger Freak.
The Ginger Freak. And then Ben Bell looks like he's been living in a Southwest Virginia cabin in the woods for a while with his burly beard and hair. He pretty productive guy at Texas State. Played 4 games last year and then shut it down to redshirt to transfer somewhere else. So you look back at his production 2 years ago. I think he had 11 sacks 2 years ago.
Yeah, sounds something
like that. So he's the guy who's gotten after the quarterback, and they need guys like that. I mean, you can't lose somebody like APR and just go, well, we'll figure it out from the roster that you have. You're going to need to bring in some guys that can try to do that. Again, in the aggregate, it's not going to be one guy putting up those numbers, but I'll be interesting to see those guys when they get here and just how effective they are against ACC caliber competition.
And as far as Dejoncum goes, I'm wondering, what if they get halfway through August and the new linebackers coach, whoever he is basically like, yeah, none of my inside linebackers have improved since last year. Do you really want to go through that again? Would you rather have Dejoncum at middle linebacker at that point, or do you keep him at defensive end? But I'm just saying it is an option.
I'm going to put that at 0.0% chance that happens. Yeah. I think they got enough linebackers.
Oh, I think they've got enough bodies. I'm just saying, what if none of them improve?
They love them some Caleb Woodson.
Oh, I'm talking about Mike specifically.
Okay. Mike specifically.
Yeah.
I guess
that might be Caleb Woodson.
Then, yeah.
Always a possibility.
It always is. You never know. I'm sure it will be at some point.
Yeah.
They like to train him in practice at least, yeah.
I guess time will only tell. But as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. FBTC returns in 2025 for their 4th year as Tech Sideline's presenting sponsor. This is a huge investment in TSL, and we thank them for their support because it makes so much of what we do possible. So thank you to First Bank and Trust Company. All right, guys, before we let everybody go,
we didn't talk about defensive tackles. We didn't talk about the tackles.
Okay.
Nash and Priester.
Okay, let's pull it in then.
Nash he's kind of undersized, but he's got great hands, great quickness. He had a good game in the playoffs against, I think it was North Dakota State, and we know those guys can block. He's a big-time pass rusher. He won't replicate the same numbers at the ACC level, but this is a guy who's definitely, when it's 3rd and 7 and you know the other team's gonna pass the ball, this guy's a major pass rushing threat from the defensive tackle position. Priester's an interesting pickup. Went to Western Branch in Chesapeake. He didn't start playing football until he was a senior in high school, so he's still very raw. Hampton listed him at 6'8", 250 this past season, which shows when he weighed in at Tech at 294, 6'6", 294 on his visit, which goes to show you that you can't take the heights and weights on some of these sites seriously. Even Virginia Tech, sometimes you can't take them seriously. I think he's very raw. I think he's got a high upside. If he sticks at defensive tackle, he'd be just about the tallest defensive tackle I can ever remember at Virginia Tech. Generally, Tech's defensive tackles in a one-gap scheme. You want shorter, twitchier guys, like 6'3" or shorter. That's generally what Virginia Tech has stuck with through the years. He's 6'6". How's that going to work out? He's got an insane reach. I guarantee you that Matt Moore will take one look at him.
This guy's got offensive tackle written all over him.
Right,
he
does.
Josh Nijman, any number of guys that they get here, and they're like, look at that wingspan and that reach. Like, imagine him on the blind side, like, extending those arms and keeping a defensive end at bay. I mean, you tell these guys what you need to get them here. That's what the Nijman thing was. Is all he wanted to hear was defensive line. It's like, you give him a couple practices there, and then you go, hey, you could be a pretty good offensive tackle. And, oh, by the way, look how much money Dwayne Brown has made, and how much money Christian Darrisaw has made, and how much money Wyatt Taylor has made. Darrisaw was always an offensive lineman, but those other two guys switch positions to become offensive linemen. It's not like a sexy spot. I don't think anybody goes to football practice like, oh man, I want to go grind in the trenches with those guys on the offensive line. Like when they're doing drills, like those look like the most miserable drills. Even the defensive line ones, you're like, it's like aggressive and you're going after stuff. And offensive line drills, you're like pushing sleds and stuff. It's like, that just looks miserable. Does not look fun. But when you say, hey, look at Dwayne Brown's career earnings, that might change your mind about things like that. So, Josh Nijman stuck around in the NFL for quite a bit too. He's with the Panthers now, I think. But, he started some games for the Packers, and he's been a, 4, 5, 6 year NFL vet, however long it's been here. So there's some opportunities there, and it would not shock me if he switched over to the offensive line eventually.
We feel good about the defensive tackles, defensive ends, everything like that. Because I got some analysis questions, and we can dive into that, and then we can let everybody go here. So first and foremost, I'll ask you guys, how would you rate this transfer class? If you had to give it a letter grade, how would you rate it? Or is it too soon to tell?
Incomplete.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Until you see him on the field, I just don't know.
Yeah, and you have to ignore, I don't want to say ignore the rankings. I know people are excited, we got the number 2 transfer portal class.
Feels very volume-based.
It's volume-based. It absolutely is. I mean, Tech has signed 19 guys. There are some other ACC programs that have signed like 10, so they don't get as many points in those rankings because they haven't signed as many players. So I saw another ranking where the Hokies were 4th. I don't know what the average star ranking is. That's probably more of an indicator of quality, but so much of it is scheme fit. So much of it is how quickly they gel with the team. Scouting, I think Tech scouting is fine. I don't think that's an issue. But the big thing for a lot of these guys, particularly let's see how many defensive players they've signed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 11 defensive players on here. Well, who's their coach going to be? Right? So we can talk about them all day. Like, it's not just who's their defensive coordinator going to be, but like if it's the safeties coach, then these safeties are going to have a new coach that isn't Pearson Prelo. There's talk of hiring a defensive ends coach, like having J.C. Price only coach defensive tackles and a new guy come in to just coach defensive ends, in which case Ben Bell and James DeJoncum would have a coach who's currently not in the program.
How do you recruit guys without answers to those questions? I
mean, I'm pretty sure Tech's got a better NIL program than Texas State.
Sure.
So I don't think it's that hard. But again, who's going to coach the inside linebackers? Maybe the next coordinator is an inside linebackers coach. Maybe he's a safeties coach. Either way, who's going to coach him? I have no idea. there's just so much unknown. So I think Tech has the makings to have a solid defense this year. I don't see a star like a PR or an ES Peoples, but I do think it has an opportunity to be a more solid, balanced defense across the board than it was a year ago. But there's still a lot of unknowns, and we can't begin to really answer the questions until we see the makeup of the defensive staff.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember at this stage is all these transfers are sort of in their ideal state because they're all theoretical in how they fit here. You haven't actually seen them practice yet, or how they take to coaching, or how they fit into the scheme or anything like that. So they come in and you go, well, look at this Pro Football Focus grade from last year. And, oh, he had 11 sacks a couple years ago, or had a really good game like in 2022 and then hit some things. Well, there's so many question marks with all these guys and how they're going to fit that that's why I think with any transfer class, I'm just going to say incomplete. Because I just don't know.
Fair.
Get to August and maybe I'll have a better sense of how it goes. But you got to see him play and you got to see him practice before you can understand how they're going to fit here. Because right now it's just sort of an idea of how they'll fit. And as we see with recruiting classes where half of the guys don't even work out and end up transferring, and even more than that now, how you think it's going to go and how it actually goes does not always match up.
Plus, let's remember there's another portal period post spring practice, and it's not going to be as big. It's not going to be as active, of course, but it is going to happen. And you're telling me right now that if you happen to see a proven solid Mike linebacker in the spring in the portal, you're not going to take him? Yeah, you're absolutely going to take him. If you can happen to get a proven starter at offensive tackle in the portal, you're absolutely going to take him. I want a blocking tight end. There's so many scholarship players these days because you can go above 85 starting this summer. There's only 3 scholarship tight ends on this roster. Zeke Wimbush is the youngest one, but he was a pass catching specialist. The other 2 struggled in run blocking mightily this past year. I want a run blocking specialist as a tight end that you can bring in for certain packages. There's got to be somebody at the FCS level who is not going to be a future NFL player, but for his last season of college football wants to make 50 or 75 grand or whatever to come in and play 11 snaps a game as a blocking specialist. I could very much use that at Virginia Tech right now. So like Andy said, incomplete. We'll find out because there's still more to be done after the spring.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, did they emphasize all the positions that you wanted to see hit, running back, things like that? You feel good about that?
Well, they needed something at every position. So
yes.
they had to throw a wide net out there to get somebody from everywhere. And they pretty much did that with the exception of tight end, like Chris mentioned.
Well, last question here for you guys. Who do you see having, and you might not have an answer to this, who do you see having the biggest impact if you had to name a couple of individuals?
That's a really, really good question. Remack. I mean, he's the best player that Virginia Tech signed in the portal because he is proven at this level of football. At a peer institution in a very similar conference, the Big 12. Absolutely proven.
I think Stewart's got a shot because he's going to get a lot of carries.
Me too.
I don't think it's going to be a Bayshall type season like that because I don't think he has that kind of explosiveness. But
Agreed.
He looks like he has the body that you can hand him the ball a lot and he could carry a big load of the running game.
Yeah, and I like the defensive lineman Tech signed. One of those safeties is at least one of them is going to have a big impact this year as well.
I say Brown Murray in the defensive backfield just because I think he's going to start.
Yep.
And he's got the experience doing that, and I think they need somebody like that at corner.
Yep.
All right, before we let everyone go, what's coming up on TechSideline.com this week? Because you got hoops going on. For instance, David's on the road, women's basketball at Pitt, and I know you guys got some stuff as well.
This week, I can't guarantee a defensive coordinator hire, so I don't know about that.
Maybe Monday.
I talked to Bayshall Tootin last night. We're doing sort of a draft diary series with him. So over the next couple months, I'll be checking in with him, talked with him about finishing up the season, picking a training spot, an agent, and all that stuff. And he's preparing for the Senior Bowl right now. So I'm not sure when the first part of that's going to run, but it's coming up here soon, and that'll be something that we have. I think we planned out 6 different entries for that through the draft.
I've got my regular Friday Q&A tomorrow. Again, we don't know when they're going to hire a defensive coordinator, so I don't know when I'm going to write that analysis article. We do know that, or we think they're going to release, the ACC is going to release the football schedules next week, right?
Yes. Today they're announcing the Week 0-1 games, which we already know. Friday, what's the second one that they're doing?
ACC
ACC opener.
Okay.
So that'll be Friday at 4 p.m.
Of course.
Great, because they got to put it on TV for the
Right.
ACC PM.
Right.
So they'll find out that. And then the next Monday is when the schedule comes out. And that's on a show at night from 9 to 11 p.m.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yes. It's ridiculous. It's absurd.
Okay, so
Remember when they used to send out an email? It's like, yeah, that's
Here's the
good
schedule.
enough. That's how you do it. You
Right.
send a little schedule grid and everybody writes about it during business hours.
Right.
And now it's got to be a TV show at night when they could be showing a basketball game.
9 o'clock.
Yeah.
9 o'clock? That's ridiculous. So?
They're awake, they're awake
Do you
earlier.
think Cal and Stanford
Yeah.
fans care about their football schedule?
Probably not.
Probably not. So, let's go ahead and do that at East Coast
And it
time
should be
from
noted
now
that
on.
we know the opponents. It's just the order.
It's just
of
the
the
order
game. So it's not even really that
Just the dates.
interesting of
And
a-
you only
a
get
reveal.
times for the first 4, right?
Yeah.
If that, I mean, that sometimes doesn't come out till the spring.
Who's your Thursday night game going to be? You might
Right.
find that out
Yeah.
if you have one.
But it's
and all
just
that.
like, oh, that's a tough stretch there. It's like, okay, but we knew the opponents.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
yeah.
dumb.
Yeah, excited to see. Regardless, though, we got an exciting one to start off. That we know the first opponent is going to be South Carolina. So I think everybody's.
And we know that's a Sunday game, correct? That's August 31st.
Yes, yeah. They just love opening the
Do we
season
have a
on my
time?
birthday.
I mean, I assume it's gonna be a night game if it's a Sunday.
Probably, and it's correct me if I'm wrong. It's that is it the Chick-fil-A kickoff game? Is that the game?
I believe so. I think they have two every year now.
Right. And the night before is Syracuse, Tennessee. Are they both the
You
Chick-fil-A
had to
games?
get a Syracuse reference. in.
Always.
You went the
You
whole
had to do
podcast.
it. We got to the
Went the
very
whole
end of this.
way.
I didn't want to jinx it. It's like talking during a no hitter. You don't bring it up, and then boom, you gave up like a 2-out single in the 9th, right there to break the streak.
Oh,
You hung a breaking ball.
Yeah.
you know, didn't go with
Yes,
the
I believe
fastball.
Syracuse is in the previous. I mean, you would know, but yes.
Had to get that in there for everybody. Been a minute. All right. Well, that I think wraps things up. For Nick Brown behind the scenes, for Andy, for Chris, I'm Giovanni. We'll see you next time. And next time, hopefully, we'll have a defensive coordinator on the Tech Sideline podcast.